Thank you all for coming. I'm going to talk about something a little bit different and come from a little bit a different angle. I am with Houston Area Move to Amend, and also a member of Texans United to Amend, which is a group of organizations in Texas working to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment. And I'm also a code pinker, and I've had a lot of fun out on the streets with code pinkers in the last few days. If you haven't been there, you've really been some fun. We've been giving them hell. Let's see. And to change slides, right click on this one? No. Okay. Next. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what role should corporations play in our democracy? The Constitution was, is there a way to do this without, or just click in the lower right hand corner? Does that work here? Yeah, that does. Okay, got it. Nope, going backwards? Not going backwards.
Go to the other side.
Just use the arrows.
There's arrows on the other side. A little bit further over.
Nope.
Almost invisible arrows down the bottom lower left.
These ones, okay, wrong arrows. Okay, sorry about that. Gotta figure out the difference between my computer and their computer. Okay, that's easier. I like that better. Okay, so corporation. The Constitution was written for we the people. It was not written for corporations. People in the government had different rights. Corporations were not included. The people were considered to be free and sovereign. Sovereign means that we rule, we're in charge. We had individual rights. The government was subordinate to the people, accountable to the people, and had collective duties. Did the Constitution mention corporations anywhere? No, they didn't. Corporations, in order to exist, had to be granted a charter. And in order to get a charter, first of all, a charter had to be for a limited time period. Had to have a purpose which was good for the public, or it's lost its charter. And notice in red, it was strictly prohibited from engaging in lobbying or political campaigns. So what happened? When did things start to change? In 1868, the 14th Amendment was passed, and the intention of the 14th Amendment was to give rights to slaves. But unfortunately, corporations started using the clause about abridging the privileges of citizens and trying to apply it to themselves. And between 1890 to 2010, there were 288 cases for corporations using that amendment, and only 19 with African Americans. So things were already becoming very warped. There were several significant court cases. These are slowly granting rights to corporations. It didn't just happen with Citizens United. The first and probably the most important was Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railway in 1886. And that happened because the court reporter actually made a mistake and said that the intention of the court ruling was to give corporations rule corporations were natural persons. That actually was not correct, but it stood. And then there were some other cases, 1919, 1976, 1978 were significant cases. And then in 2010, along comes Citizens United, and it overrules two precedents. It overrules restrictions on corporate spending to support candidates and restrictions on corporate spending by corporations and union. So the Supreme Court, basically what it was saying, which is really important for us to move to amend, it was saying that a corporation is a person and that money is speech. The Supreme Court has really got things screwed up. It's forgotten the distinction between corporations and people. We, the people, have unalienable constitutional rights. Government has powers, but a corporation has privileges, and they have forgotten that being a corporation originally in this country meant having the privilege of having a charter and running a business. So basically, what's the difference between a person and not a person? It's pretty obvious what a person is and what a person isn't. But the guy on the right also wants to be known as a person. There's been a lot of talk about the Powell memo. The only thing that really hasn't been said so far is that Lewis Powell had been the chairman of the board of several corporations before the Powell memo was written, and also that the Powell memo was also a response to the New Deal. And also, if you go back and research, you also read that he was also very unhappy with this guy called Ralph Nader, who was talking about the environment. So then ALEC comes into the picture, and we talk even more about corporate privileges beginning. So what special powers do corporations have because they have personhood? And how does this affect the rights of we the people? Well, my view of ALEC is that the exchange in ALEC means we give you campaigns and you give us the legislation we want. That's the exchange that goes on. And I think the representative from Wisconsin who's been there for a few days would probably agree with us. It's all about getting the people you want in power. And this is what's going on over the Anatole. And when you start researching ALEC, what becomes very interesting, because I hadn't really thought of ALEC and Coke as being quite as intertangled as they are. They're very, very, very tangled up. The Coke has, in the past few years, somebody's come up with this drawing called a Coctopus, because Coke has tentacles that are getting into the government in 8 different ways. Notice ALEC is down just a little bit to the left of center on the bottom. It's in their wealth warrior category. And then a lot of those groups that were mentioned by one of our earlier speakers are under things like fake grassroots groups, think tanks. Basically, they're into everything. And of course, ALEC is also very into them, because Koch brothers are on the board. These are the people that are currently on the companies that are presently on the enterprise board, and not ALEC, but Koch companies is on the list. Another thing that has happened is that the Supreme Court has become very influenced by these corporations. Before the Citizens United decisions, Thomas and Scalia had become very involved with ALEC. They'd been to ALEC conventions, they'd spoken at ALEC events, and actually after Citizens United on the first anniversary, Common Cause tried to get the Justice Department to look into conflicts of interest based on that decision. There were people who thought they should have recused themselves. ALEC's money comes from ALEC controls the right to vote. I'm sorry, I can't see my screen, which is making it a little bit trickier because it's at such an angle. ALEC has controlled our right to vote. And actually, as someone earlier said, Paul Wayrick has said that he doesn't want everybody voting, because if everybody votes, the right wing doesn't get what they want. And they make legislation, and they make a lot of legislation. They write the bills. This is some of the national scope of their legislation, which people have already talked about, so there's no reason to go through all of those. So where does ALEC's money come from? As somebody already said, it comes mostly from corporations. The legislators don't have to pay very much to join, because basically they want the legislators there because they want to be able to influence them. So what do we do about it? Move to Amend is working to end corporate rule of our democracy and regain it for the citizens. We believe that only an amendment can change this, and we need a Supreme Court decision. And only an amendment can overrule a Supreme Court decision, and we need a constitutional amendment to stop this. We need to redefine the rights of corporations. We propose a 28th Amendment, which would state that human beings and not entities have constitutional rights, basically that corporations are not people. And then the other thing that we think is really important and essential to have in this amendment would say that money is not equivalent to speech, and therefore can be regulated, which it is not being done. Okay, I'm going to stop that. I actually had a couple of slides I've deleted. How would we do this? There are 2 ways in which we would go about doing this. we would either get Congress to pass an amendment or hold a constitutional convention to create such an amendment. In either way, either case, there would have to be 2/3 of the vote of the representatives of Congress to pass an amendment, and then it would have to go to the states for ratification, in which case 3/4 would have to ratify. One of the things that we are doing in every state is lobbying the legislators to pass resolutions asking for an amendment, and I would like to say thank you to Representative Burnham, because he was one of the people who really worked a lot with us in the last legislative session, and he had a resolution asking for a constitutional convention to overturn Citizens United. We have information about our group on the table out in the hall. We would like you to join us. We need numbers. I thank you for being here, and I thank you for your time. Thank you for so much for coming because of your concern about ALEC.